Well, thank you for the introduction. Again, like I said, my name is Sylwestrak. I'm kind of excited. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to this stuff. I really like to talk about the air duct side of things. Even though as a brand, Stanley Steemer, we've been doing this for about 20 plus, a little over 20 plus years. We started just like anybody else, trying to understand the industry, see how the industry has evolved and grown, and it has really expanded into pretty much a lot of awareness. We're going to talk about that a little bit later about awareness, especially with you, because pretty much everybody in here is a facilities person, which is right in line. So this actually does matter to you. My goal here is to really kind of explain the process of the cleaning process. You also heard about encapsulation. I'm going to talk about that towards the end because refurbishing ductwork is a viable option now. Where if you were to ask this 12 years ago, that really wasn't the case. You just had to have an HVAC mechanical contractor come out and say, okay, we need to replace all this stuff, and here's this big, huge bill, and go that route. Well, that is not necessarily the case anymore. We do quite a bit of this stuff when it comes to encapsulation, and really help with ductwork that has integrity issues, has problems, and can cause future problems. So as I go through this, I'll have a whole bunch of room for questions at the end, but let me kind of go through this with you guys. What is air duct cleaning? Okay, so air duct cleaning is not what I think a lot of people realize it is. It is very elaborate, to do it correctly, you're gonna hear terms like NATCA, which if anybody in facilities had any new build or reconstruction, a lot of the scopes of work now, it'll request a NACA certified firm or a NACA certified person to be there. They are the governing body for duct cleaning. They set the standard nationwide, worldwide actually, saying this is the correct way of doing it, this is the incorrect way of doing it. So you're going to hear a lot of people, because you can flip through any book or in your phone and find about 45 different air duct companies out there, and they range from, hey, we're going to do this your building for $7.95 to something. You laugh because you see it. Yeah, I know. But really, if you were to look at this, it's more or less like an HVAC cleaning system. Air ducts are important, but so is that HVAC system. You guys deal with that on a regular basis with facilities, from filters changing to, hey, it's not cooling, to the coils, to the blower wheels, to, when we talk about cleaning, we're also talking things like, diffusers, VAV boxes, you're talking turning vanes, you're talking a whole bunch that really contributes to how the system works and how it was designed to work. And a lot of people don't realize that this is more of an out of sight, out of mind, right? You don't think about duct cleaning unless somebody talks about duct cleaning, right? Because you got a million other things when you deal with a facility, right? The only time you ever talk about air cleaning is what? You get a complaint. If you're in the college section, you got a parent that complains about how this place smells like mold and mildew, and you have all of these. You don't ever talk about it unless you have a complaint. So as we go through this, you guys are going to see that, your jobs, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure most of your job is very reactive, right? You guys are dealing with a facility, and then you have all the other elements, whether somebody feels sick in this area in the building, or, hey, the parent came over here and said, hey, I can't let my kids live in this area because it's got mold and it's so bad, and black mold and the M word and everything else. So duct cleaning is the entire duct system, okay? All of you guys have your own HVAC companies that go over there and they service it and make sure it works. You probably have some on staff if you have a big enough building, and but they only focus on that unit. Are the pressures right? Does it have enough, freon in it, or liquid in it, or does it, this valve shut down and I got to replace it? Because you'll notice that most HVAC systems or HVAC mechanical contractors, it's all about, well, this isn't working, let me replace it. And you can see a lot of that stuff. All right, so is there a need for duct cleaning? The answer is yes, but there's an asterisk next to that. A lot of stuff in a facilities, in a building, in a commercial or an industrial center like this, filtration has a huge part of that. But what happens over time is that all the contaminants that run through the system over time start to collect. As most everybody here is probably down south in the Florida area, right? Because this is Florida, FLAPA, right? So you deal with a lot of things like ductboard. You deal with flex line. You deal with, especially on that ductboard side, that stuff is very porous, right? So as things start to collect and everything starts to run through, it slowly starts to get in the corners, then it starts to build up, and sometimes we need to clean that out. A couple different reasons as we go through on the benefit side of things. Actually, I'm going to flip that right there. Benefits to the cleaning. The HVAC system, when it's built up, and I will show you some pictures towards the end that it'll be like, wow. But as it starts to build up, your system starts to work harder, okay? Most facilities will say, hey, you know what? The HVAC guy is going to say, hey, I need to go over here and I need to clean these coils. And he is absolutely correct. Those coils definitely need to be looked at, okay? Especially when we start talking about the M word a little bit later, okay? Because those coils are probably 80% of the problem, okay? When things get impacted, air's got to go somewhere. Generally in our systems, when you have air handlers, it goes right into that pan, grabs moisture, kicks it back out, and now you have dust that is accumulated in there, and we'll get into that more on the M word. So the benefits to this, by doing this, your system will work more efficient. It will actually work better. It will actually have less problems. You'll have less failures, if you will. Let me see here, yes. Energy saving. Again, I'm going through the reasons and benefits why. 20 to 25 to 40% of the energy that comes from heating and cooling is actually wasted, okay? Most of that is because the system has to work harder, and when it has to work harder, guess what? There goes your ticket, there goes the bill, everything keeps going up. Have anybody ever opened up an air handler and seen that the fins inside that wheelhouse for the fan blade is just caked? Okay, those things are designed to have a bevel in there, right? So they can scoop air and go. Well, guess what happens when somebody's in there saying, okay, I need to lower this. I need the temperature to feel good. It's not feeling good. Well, a lot of times that thing is caked up. It's not moving air enough, and it's working harder. Okay, so by having that stuff cleaned, again, HVAC cleaning includes the ductwork. By cleaning that stuff, you get your system now runs smoother, uses less energy, lasts longer. The components don't fail as much, especially when we start talking about big facilities in those turning vanes, because how many of you guys, I'm willing to bet, most people have never seen the inside of the ductwork minus by the air handler in your systems. So in this facility right here, or let's say elementary school, or yes, elementary school is a good example. By going in there, the people that deal with the rooftop units or people that deal with the air handlers in the one mechanical room, they've only seen the ductwork inside of those areas, okay? But if I were to look in that back corner of a classroom, you probably have never seen the inside of that ductwork, okay? And that's where I'm going to show you guys some pictures, and we start talking about inspections and how you can really turn that job into, instead of reactive, turning it into a proactive situation, right? Because let's face it, when we're reactive, it costs whatever facility or whatever organization you're with, it costs you more and more money, right? So, energy savings, indoor air quality. Okay, how it's important. Again, another benefit, another thing to kind of keep in mind. The contaminants, which is I use that in quotations because that contaminants can be anything. You have dust particles. A lot of the stuff that comes from that comes from indoor, outdoor. If you're in for example, like if you're in a upper education and you have like a dorm room and people keep the doors open and people are flying in and out of there all the time, a lot of that contaminants come in there. Or let's say you're in a commercial building and you have things like construction done because we had an event where there's a flood or something like that, and they have drywall and they're sanding and they're painting everything else. All of that gets put into the duct system that nobody realizes, okay? Now, it's relevant because the average air exchange, and this is kind of important, and this is one of the reasons you guys will probably relate to, the average air exchange is between 5 and 7 times a day. So that means the air that you're breathing right now is running through that system 5 to 7 times in a day. Well, anybody probably relate in your own household where, let's say, a child gets sick and you try to stay away from the child because the child's sick, and what tends to happen? The whole entire family eventually gets it. Why? Well, because they're sick, it's getting into the air system. You have air exchanges 5 to 7 times a day, and boom, now the whole entire family is sick on a regular basis. That's no different than in a commercial building. You know, if somebody all of a sudden starts to get a flu in the office, what happens? You get the flu, then you get the flu, and then you get the flu, and that's exactly what happens. Now, we have filtration in your systems, but that only goes so far, okay? So it's kind of important to make sure that we keep that indoor air quality efficient and making sure it's clean. Now, again, when we talk about air duct cleaning, I don't want to mislead you in any way. Some buildings, some filtration is so good because of the engineering of it that you don't need to get it done very often. Okay, for example, like I do in our market, we've done the prisons. Okay, you want to talk about it. They don't get them in and they don't have a lot of in and out, but the prisons in there, there's people that are constantly sick and constantly going in. And when we clean that ductwork, their filtration is extremely well. We clean it, we only have to get out there about every 7 to 8 years. Okay, so this is not something that, you know what, I need to get this done on a regular basis, but you don't know that because, like I said, nobody's ever looked inside your ductwork to say, hey, this is it, right? You had a question? Go ahead.
Just curious.
Please.
What's the NACA standard for what they recommend?
Duct cleaning is about 3 to 5 years, depending on your environment. Because again, what is your job in facilities? Reactive, right? You ever had a fire in any of your buildings? You ever had a flood in any of your buildings, right? You ever had that M word because the air handler wasn't working correctly? All of that is contributing to maybe we need to get done a little bit more often. You know, there's some situations where, you know, condo facilities where, you know, we clean this wing and this other wing didn't need to get done. So we don't clean this whole side of the wing, but we clean here because they had, you know, or even a government building where they have so many VAV boxes all the way through there that they can separate and we only have a problem in this area. So situations like that, I would say more. Does the whole thing necessarily need to get done? Probably not. You know, but again, that's when we start to get into inspections and why inspections are extremely important in this. It sounds like I'm kind of an advocate for the HVAC companies, but they have a very important role in this. You know, having a good HVAC company that is honest with you is very, very important. Yes, we're cleaners, and I'm a NACA guy, yes, but it's imperative that those people do the things and inspect it because, again, you're not up in the ductwork on a regular basis. All right, so let's talk about that inspection. I kind of went right in line. So inspecting it is not something that, you know, hey, I need to schedule this every 6 months or every quarter. But I say about every, you know, if I did an inspection, for an example, if I did an inspection on this building or this side of the building, and this is a huge building. If I did it on this side of the building, and I identified that, you know what, it's really not that bad. You have a couple bad sections. This area probably ought to get clean. This area is good. You know, I could probably get away with doing an inspection about every year and a half, 2 years to come take a look at it because you have failure. You have coils in the VAV box because they're inline coils in there that are impacted and it caused problems in this section but not in this other section. So having those kind of inspections I would recommend anybody that's a ventilation inspector. There's actually a certification through NACA with that. So that's why I talk about NACA a lot because having somebody with NACA makes your job easier. And I'm not here to sell NACA. I'm just saying they're the governing body, right? So inspections are important, but who also can make those inspections are your mechanical contractors. They're over there cleaning your coils every 6 months. I say that because we all have that, like, yeah, right, you didn't clean that. I deal with it every day, but that's okay. But they go over there and say, okay, hey, they check your levels, they check your freon, they check, you know, the voltage from this component to the next component, and they do that, and it's very valuable. But while they're in there, we should be saying, hey, how does the plenums look? How does the inside of that ductwork look? Okay? Now, there's a misconception as we start to go through this. There's a misconception on duct cleaning. And I'm going to go ahead and fix this real quick for you because anybody that's been in facilities for a long time, the number one thing that you're going to hear is that, Either air duct is a scam or it's going to mess up your ductwork. And if anybody's been in facilities long enough, you're going to hear that. In fact, if you ask your trusted HVAC mechanical contractor, the first thing they're going to say is you don't need to do that. And a lot of that is they're just not informed, okay? They are partially correct. So let me go ahead and kind of debunk some of that stuff right now. So let's talk about we're going to damage the ductwork because where we are in Florida here, we have a whole lot of duct board and flex line, okay? They are absolutely correct. If you go in with some really harsh agitation tools, you are going to damage that ductwork. They are absolutely correct about that. But there are ways to do it to standard that is not going to damage it. And a lot of those, it's kind of interesting right now. I can only speak for my market and for most of the Stanley Steemer, I can say, is that we now have HVAC companies that are like, hey, you're going to clean the ducts for me when I need it. And now they're getting in a cycle because the awareness is starting to get out there when we talk about it a little bit more further. But the damaging part of that is true if you don't do it correctly, okay? For an example, and I don't want to throw out names because I'm not that guy, but there are systems out there that are the less expensive way to get into a market, okay? For example, there are systems that have a vacuum right here that have brushes on the end of it and, this tube of vacuum that comes through there and, it says it's going to clean it. Those are the agitation tools that, number one, will damage ductwork over time and sometimes fairly quickly. But as we go into more of the cleaning process in a little bit, you're going to hear that those systems aren't to standard. That's why I keep talking about NACA. NACA is the governing body, and I'm telling you right now, they have it right. Okay, so we'll go through that. But inspections, I would utilize your HVAC guys. I would definitely utilize, maybe even call a NACA certified member to say, hey, you know what, come out here and take a look at this and make sure that we're good. Because if you're proactive, that allows you to be less reactive, okay? Yes, so inspections, I kind of already touched on this real quick. So restoration side of things. So there's a time and a place for restoration, okay? There are some times that when we start to talk about encapsulation and things like that to fix problems with ductwork, there are some times that it's just beyond that point and you have to replace it, okay? So don't want to mislead anybody on that. There are times where you just need to replace that section of ductwork and there's no way around it, right? So if the integrity of that ductwork is flapping like this and it's covering half of it, guess what? I don't think any encapsulation is going to fix that problem. When you see some pictures, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But there are some times you just have to replace it. Okay, and that's where you need that HVAC mechanical contractor. But there are times where, restoration means everything. Restoration means like there are some times that, hey, you know what, that blower wheel's too rusted and it's gears and we got to replace just that blower wheel. Or, hey, guess what, that turning vane that feeds this whole wing of a building is damaged because of an event that happened. Okay, so there's a roof leak. And when the roof leaked, it got something wet and it fell down on top of it. Now there's a hole in the ductwork, and all of these events happen on a regular basis. I hate to say that, but it does happen. Has anybody ever had a smoke incident where you had a fire in a facility? That smoke gets in everywhere, right? It goes to the least path of resistance and now it's everywhere, okay? So what tends to happen is that these events happen, the restoration side of things, that's where we have to decide, okay, is it more functional for us to do things like coatings, which I'm going to talk to a little bit later, or is it best to just go ahead and replace it? Okay, so I don't have this magic, when we're talking about this, I don't have a magic wand that says, okay, this is the fix all, let me just encapsulate the entire thing. That's not necessarily the fix, but it is a valuable fix now for a lot of cases. You'd be surprised. Has anybody ever seen the price point of any HVAC mechanical contractor replacing ductwork? That's one of the few things that I will say the industry, I should have been in that part of the industry, but that part of the industry where they don't budge. They don't budge and give you a deal and say, hey, I'm going to do this. It's going to make it less expensive. Why? Because they're getting in attics. They're taking down things. They're taking out drywall. It's a demolition sometimes project for that. And they don't give a lot on that part of the industry. Also, yes, water. Water seems to be the number one event that really does affect the HVAC system, but a lot of people don't realize that it's subtle and out of sight, out of mind, okay? Right now, there's probably 3 or 4 diffusers right in here. There's 4 of them right there. You have no idea what's on the other side of those diffusers and 5 feet in. You have no idea. We also don't know that, let's say, a month ago, we had a flood in here because there was a pipe that broke in this wall right here. This whole thing flooded, and they had to come over here, and they had to extract. They had air scrubbers. They had blowers and dehumidifiers and all of this stuff kicking around. Do you think for 1 second that they turned that off? It didn't happen, right? So what happens is, remember at the beginning when I said accumulation, right? As the ductwork starts to accumulate, you get the dust, you get the dander, the dead skin, all of the stuff that accumulates up there, and now you have a food source, okay? When we start to go into the M word, right? We have food source now, so as the evaporation happens during the drying process, guess what happens? You have a whole lot of humidity, you have warmth. Why do I have warmth? Because I have 47 blowers in here and 45 other dehumidifiers in here creating heat. So now we have a whole bunch of heat, we have a whole bunch of moisture, and now we have a food source. And that, 9 out of 10 times, is where most of the problem ends up coming in off an event. That's where those inspections come into play. That's where the duct cleaning actually really makes a difference on there. Because what is the duct board? Duct board is what? Fiberglass. It does absorb in there. If you have duct board, which I would encourage you guys, when I show you guys, you can definitely come see my booth, at the expo here, I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about, okay, where you can see that it is absorbent, you can see that you have discolorations, you can see that. If you ever open up a plenum and see that, hey, why is everything black right here, right? That's the M, no, it's not. It's just black, it's probably dirty, okay, that's the way it was. And it is actually, it does stain, right? So I'll definitely show you guys that, but that's why the restoration side of this is not a black and white situation, okay? Cleaning process. Okay, so when it comes to your facilities, game planning is critical, okay? I can give you examples, Chad was mentioning that I work with him on a regular basis, right? So, and you could probably speak to Chad outside of this, and he can probably tell you, don't take my opinion, take his opinion from that. But me working with the dorms and working with things like that for the duct cleaning, I'm willing to bet, and you can ask him later, I need an answer on that, Chad, but I'm willing to bet that since we started doing proactive stuff there, and we started cleaning and certain situations where we're encapsulating, I'm willing to bet that he has less restoration work being done. If you're anybody of the Belfour guys is here, you probably don't want to hear that stuff because that's restoration and that's good money. But I'm willing to bet in most markets, for somebody that's been in this industry for 25 years, an average restoration job for that, I know in Florida, is automatically $10,000. Automatically $10,000. Why? Especially in a residential setting, because there's a cap for that mold job of $10,000, and you would be surprised on how much of those restoration and mold companies can get it to $10,000 really quick. It's even more so on a commercial building. I bet you people are paying anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 for every restoration job in there. Is it worth it? If you're doing a full restoration, I'd say yes, because those guys know what they're doing. But if you're preventative and you're cleaning, I'm willing to bet that I probably save them, I don't even know, he could tell you about that. But let's see here. Yes, but planning is critical. So somebody like this building right here, this wing, we have events going on. You have people in and out of there. Or if you're in a facilities, like we just cleaned a library, a ginormous library, okay, that's open all the time. And their county building says, nope, you are not closing this thing down. Okay, so planning for that to get the duct cleaning done in that system took a lot of logistics. It took a lot of planning, working with the property management guys, and working in and doing things section at a time until we got it done, right? So I'm willing to bet if even in your facilities, it's the same thing. Planning is critical. I'm a big organizer guy, so I like to organize things. I know for Chad, I'm only going to mention because you're right there, but for Chad, I'm going to probably do like 80 to 100 every summer to refurbish a lot of that stuff for them. About 80 to 100 of them. And we got it down to a science now because of planning and organization, because guess what? If anybody here with the colleges, right? Everybody's here with the colleges, right? So what do you have during the summer? You have this window of, I got to get everything done right now, right? And you have 45 other contractors coming in all at the same time. That organization is critical. So any kind of job really requires that kind of planning. I think we're going to get his done in like a month and a half, and it's going to be pretty smooth on that. But planning is huge when we start talking about the cleaning process, especially in more of the industrial side of cleaning. All right, so last little bit of the cleaning part. So let's talk about what is NACA's cleaning process, okay? NACA's process isn't necessarily Stanley Steemer, do it just like that, even though we are a certified firm for them. But that only means that we do everything to standard. So the key parts of this, okay, and for anybody that's in charge of facilities, this is kind of critical. Negative air is the most important part of this, okay? When the whole system is under negative air, whether you're talking the return side or you're talking about the supply side, when we clean a section, that entire area has to be under negative air while we are going through there. Because you need things to go to your vacuum, remove it from the building, or, to get it out, right? What tends to happen, okay, is when you don't have negative air and you're just going up there cleaning and scrubbing and pushing air and everything else, what happens is you just really kick up everything. All these different particles, all these contaminants get moved around, but if you don't have that negative air removing it, what happens? It settles right back down. Even worse so is if you have that positive air going through there without the negative air and it kicks up, you've loosened a bunch of stuff, and as soon as you kick on that unit, what happens? You're going to get nothing but, look at my desk, look at all of this stuff, it's everywhere. You're going to get constant. You got to go and deal with now you're reactive, right? So negative air is the key part of that, okay? So standard says you put the whole thing under negative air, you take down all of those diffusers, all of the VAV boxes are a little bit different. You have to kind of do both sides of them at the same time. Sometimes that's kind of tricky too. But you're supposed to put the whole thing under negative air. Then you're supposed to use the compressed air through every one of those legs into that main trunk line, removed and gone. That's the simple version of this. If you have somebody that doesn't do the negative air through the whole system with that compressed air, they're not doing it to standard. And that's critical. So it doesn't matter what company you use. I'm not here to say Stanley Steemer, which I am always, but it doesn't matter where you guys are at. Having that process done correctly is going to save you time, money, and it's going to be clean. Those turning vanes, I bet you don't even know on some of those big buildings that you have turning vanes in there, right? That's where any mechanical contractor would be like, yeah, let me see your blueprints. Okay, yes. You have turning vanes here, 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 because we have this big system on the roof that pushes it all the way through, and this is how it gets. And you'd be surprised on how much of those turning vanes are just caked. It's an obstruction inside of the ductwork to help guide the air through a corner. And what happens is it gets so gunked up and full, it just takes there, and now you have a collection point. And that's never good, right? So negative air is very, very important. Agitation tools. There is a place for agitation tools, but it's not on ductboard, right? It's not on those turning vanes. It is on the metal. My guys unfortunately don't get to see a whole lot of metal because we're in Southwest Florida, but because most of it's flex line and ductboard. Guess what? If you use an agitation tool and flex line, guess what happens? You tear it up. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what happens. That's why you have HVAC companies saying, don't get that done. You're going to ruin your ductwork. Just replace it. Right? No, there are ways to doing that using compressed air without the agitation tools. However, there are some buildings that what they'll do is which is clever, is they'll make the plenums metal. So you have these big metal boxes right next to your air handlers, right? Especially if it's on the roof. If it's on the roof, what you're going to have is you're going to have about 4 feet down of this metal, those you can do agitation tools. Those you can beat them up. And my guys, like, it's like a field day when they get to see metal because they get to use things like whips and brushes and all sorts of cool stuff they don't get to do. But there's a time and a place for that stuff. But again, I keep going back to it, negative air, right? To do a proper building, you got to have the proper tools. Okay, for an example, I have this side of the building right here. Okay, everybody realizes there's a nice, big, large building, right? If I come in with a little tiny vacuum that runs about, 4,000 CFMs, how much vacuum am I really creating? You're not. You're just not, right? But if I bring in machinery that can get it up to 20 to 25,000 CFM, guess what? We're moving air, right? Now, there are things to zone off and ways of doing it, but you need to have the company that comes out there needs to have the correct machinery, right? 20,000 CFM, I should be able to go like this and just throw a piece of paper and whoosh, it's gone, right? That's the kind of vacuum that should happen. And it's funny, every time I've had this presentation, I've always said, well, have you ever smashed it? Unfortunately, yes. We had it too strong, we didn't adjust it accordingly, and we have smashed some ductwork on that once or twice in my career. It was a pain in the butt, and I called my favorite HVAC guy to come out there and fix it, right? So that has happened in the past. Okay, so let's see, yes. So that's the key part of this. If you ask NACA's going to tell you that you should probably get it inspected once a year, okay? If you have a good inspector, I think you can do it every other year and be just fine in this industry, okay? From what I've seen, I've been doing this, like I said, for over 20 years. But after that inspection, figuring out and game planning, because let's say it, when we deal with bigger facilities, you deal with more budgetary issues. You have to make sure you get it in the plans, and then sometimes that's where that planning comes into place. Planning is critical on things like that. If you want to be the proactive and stay on top of it, planning and having those inspections, I think, would be critical. So let's do this. I'm going to go through a couple pictures. All right, this is perfect. I'm right in line. Sorry, guys, I'm used to doing this for like a couple hours at a time, and he said, you got 45 minutes. All right, so if you guys probably can't see this, I'm going to go through a couple of these. You're going to see on the one on the left there, this was actually from a commercial building that we did an inspection on, okay? And all we did was do an inspection, okay? As we did the inspection, we're going through the HVAC, they had about 42 air handlers on this nice, big, large building, and we come over there, and what we found is that they had rodents that had gone into the facility, chewed through the ductwork, and made nests all in there side of that. So what you see on right here, on this left-hand side, is a whole pile of just, ugh. And that is a technical term. I just want to throw that out there. All right, so and on the right-hand side, after cleaning it and wiping it down and cleaning it to standard, you can see that there's a little bit of a difference right there, a little bit of a difference. That probably weighed about 20 pounds of just crap that was put in there. But again, out of sight, out of mind, right? Would any of you guys have known that as long as the air is on and you don't have a reactive problem and nobody's going like, hey, I'm having an issue, or hey, my allergies and things like that, nobody would have checked that, right? You see on the left-hand side, this is what I'm referring to as buildup over time. It doesn't happen overnight. This is one of the reasons why I told you at the very beginning, this is not something you have to get done every year, okay? But that buildup on the left-hand side had been their way. It only took them about 16 years to get that kind of buildup. Now, that was my opinion, that was an engineering problem, because what they did is they had a main trunk line going all the way through, and yes, all the legs were coming into it, but what they did is some genius engineer said, you know what, hey, let's tie in all these exhaust fans to it, and it was a mess. But again, some of these old buildings that you guys may run into or see over there, engineering was not necessarily as efficient as they are today, right? So we walk into it all on a regular basis. I did a courtyard one time a courthouse that literally, I tell you right now, I don't even know how it passed any inspection ever, but I think it's because it was a courthouse that got away with it. It was all sorts of a mess. It had like probably one line had like 15 different 90-degree turns. And I'm like, I don't even know how that passed inspection on anything. So Again, buildup. Now, buildup, if you notice on the left-hand side, I don't know if you guys can see it really well, but the buildup doesn't mean that I'm restricting it to the point where it's like this, okay? What I mean by that is that you have buildup that you'll go up to about 1 inch or 2 inches of buildup that settles at the bottom of that ductwork, but what that also does is it also gives things food source, right? So now what happens is, as I told you, it already has 5 to 7 exchanges a day, right? The air we're breathing right now, 5 to 7 times a day, it's going to come through this system. What do you think it's doing as it's going through there? It's picking things up. It's pushing it. It's picking things up, moving it. That's funny because I used to tease back in the day about people who were like in office buildings saying, hey, I have these allergies and it's only when I go to the office and it's only in this one corner, and we used to tease all the time like it's all in here, right? But in some cases I believe that is true since COVID, but that's not necessarily the case. Somebody might be allergic to certain things that have built up inside of that ductwork. And even though air can still get past that on the left-hand side, it's also what else is it picking up? Some people, anybody like allergic to grass? Nobody. I always have at least one person that says they're allergic to grass. Or dust or anything like that, guess what? When you have buildup and it pushes over there, guess what? Or people in a building, an office, you'll have somebody in an office, and this happens a lot, where they get really cold in this office. So what do? Is they start taping things up on the diffusers to kind of prevent things from air coming in and being cold, right? Well, guess what happens? Now you have more buildup. Now it's pushing all that stuff to somebody else, right? So cleaning this part, again, out of sight, out of mind. That's why it's kind of important to have this stuff done. Scopes of work. You want to talk about planning, okay? On the left-hand side, you're going to see that I have plastic up there. This was a job that had an event, okay? It actually was a fire. On this fire, then they came in and they soaked everything to put out the fire, okay? So actually, you might well consider that 2 events. Had a fire event, then we had a water event, right? So as it goes through there, what we did is as they were tearing everything out, everybody kept noticing like, oh man, it's really bad in here and there's a smell and everything else. Well, what we ended up finding is that particular building, as it was engineered, and I think in the late 60s, is that they utilized the drop ceiling as an open return. So what happens is they say it's more efficient. So what they'll do is they'll have these lights, they'll have little openings inside the lights. And what happens is that all of that air gets sucked in there because they have a fan way up on the top of the roof that's pulling air in. So what happens is that it's the easiest way it's the least expensive way, is that say, hey, the drop ceiling, we're going to use this as an open plenum return. So all of the dust gets accumulated and it sits there, and guess what happens when it gets in above the ceiling and above the drop ceiling right there? It goes back up there and just falls. It just collects. So as we were going over there and we're seeing this after an event, you're going to see on the right-hand side, I don't know if you guys can see that, but that is a pile of nothing but dust, debris, and nastiness that was right on top of the drop ceiling because they utilized that as a open plenum return, right? Engineering is pretty impressive stuff, especially when you get, from my side anyways. I've seen them use walls. I've seen them use open cavities for no reason. And whoever invented, hey, let me just use this closet as a return, I still don't understand that one. And people to this day in a condo, you're going to see like, hey, my whole closet's a return. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff in there. So, all right, so NACA, when we talk about resurfacing, now let's get into, I'm right in line, okay. Sorry, I used to do a long time. So when we talk about refurbishing and we talk about coating, okay, there's a time and a place for it, especially with ductboard. If you look at that and you have an inspection and all of a sudden you see that, hey, you have small little tears, but it's not too bad. But they're saying, and this is right out of the NACA ACR 2021 book. In fact, if you ever want to check on your contractors, I'm pretty sure you can get that for probably about $4 on NACA's site. But that tells you all of the standards. So if you want somebody to do it right, that's how they got to be doing it by that book, right? So this says right here with the refacing and coating may be considered when thermoacoustic fiberglass components. For example, that's just like the duct board, that's the plenums, that's, and you're gonna also, it can be considered when you have situations like, have you ever seen the duct board that's been there for 30 years and you go over there and you grab it and all of a sudden it just crumbles and deteriorates in your hand? I can tell you right now, recoating that, my recommendation would be get that part replaced. Get your mechanical contractor out there, have him replace that stuff. But if it's not that bad, coating can do that. So what is coating? Coating actually, as we come over here, I talked about awareness already. This is awesome. All right, let's talk about coatings. So encapsulation is actually coating the inside of the ductwork, not the outside, not going and taking mastic and going around it and everything else. This is actually coating the inside of it, which means there's several different ways that we apply it. We do things like, you could brush it on, roll it on, spray it on. We do sprays. We have special robots that people have out there that can go in and turn corners, and it's cool. You're playing a video game. But they spray this coating on there. Now, this coating is designed strictly for ductwork, okay? Now, there are several different types over there. If anybody wants to see my booth, I'll tell you exactly where I get it from. But again, I would still have a NACA person doing it because they're getting inside the ductwork. But what this coating does is if you have a microbial problem, okay, let me give you some examples, okay? I told you that coils, I believe, are probably the largest percent of problems when you come with microbial growth, the M word, right? What happens is those coils get impacted. Well, air's still coming because you have a blower wheel that's still pushing everything. So as it's pulling all that air in there and it has nowhere to go because the coils are impacted, it goes to the least path of resistance. So what does it do? It goes down. What's below that coil? A pan, exactly. So as it comes across there to be shot back out on the supply side, it picks up moisture. When it picks up moisture, guess what it does? It goes whoosh. And as it sprays over there, what does it hit? It hits the lining, inside lining of the ductwork, or the duct board, if you will, and which is absorbent, which has the dust, which has the contaminants, which has a food source, and boom, there you go. That's why in a residential home, we see mold almost 9 out of 10 times on the side of the plenum of the supply side, right there, because it's shooting air right through it, okay? Now, the coating, why is that important? Well, if you have that problem, you're going to have a restoration company that let's replace it, which is viable. It can be done that way. However, by coating it and by having this a special encapsulation designed for the duct board, is that you coat it, it traps everything in. Doesn't let anything in, doesn't let anything out, and it also improves on those integrity issues. When you have the small flaking inside there that you go and you see the flapping inside of the ductwork, you probably haven't, but I have 100 times. But you get that, and what happens is by coating the inside of that thing, you've sealed everything in. Well, if you sealed it in, it can't go through the duct board, right? If you've ever seen duct board, as you see it on my booth, you'll see that it's got that rubber, that silver lining on the outside. Nothing's getting in and out of that. So now I've trapped it. So now when I've trapped it, guess what? It doesn't have the food source, doesn't have the humidity, doesn't have the way of growing and festering and things like that. So now you've trapped it, you've now killed it. That is a full restoration when it comes to that duct board. If I spray the inside of it and the whole coating is in there, nothing's getting in, nothing's getting out. Now, there's a good and a bad side to all things, right? The advantage of having the inside encapsulated, especially in the plenums, especially in the boots or cans, those, because guess what? If anybody has a facility that has tenants, you're going to see, especially right there, thank you, man. You're going to see that most people look outside the vents and see black outside the vents and say, oh my God, I have mold and let's get this fixed. And that's where you get the problem in that, right? That's why coating inside of that fixes that problem also, okay? So trap it in, nothing out. I know the stuff I use stuff that has an antimicrobial property built into it and keeps it from growing. Now, the downside to this, is now you have ductboard that doesn't absorb. It doesn't collect. You have a smooth surface. So guess what happens? Filtration is a very important thing when it comes to this because now it's really hard for it to stick to everything and accumulate. So now what happens is when that thing kicks on and blows, boom, it's going straight out, and now you got the filtration is more important. But what you don't have is you don't have the problem inside the ductwork. And that's valuable. Quick questions. I only have a couple of minutes left. Some of the ductwork I've shown you, again, doesn't look like much on the left-hand side. On the right side was right after we cleaned it. Now, we start to go into encapsulation. Left side, we cleaned it. Right side, we encapsulated. You see all that nice white right there. Again, same thing. Ductboard on the left-hand side, encapsulated the right side. Nothing's getting in, nothing's getting out. We've just now strengthened the integrity of that ductwork right there. Do I have to replace that now? No. Same thing. Look at that cavity on the left-hand side. See the right? Sorry, I use white I should have used black because it comes in black too, because then if you miss something, it doesn't matter. However, as an industry, I'd like to be everything on the up and up. So I have white, so if my guys miss something, guess what? You can see it. So that's why we use that.